I am Bruce Hall.
You serviced in the U.S. Army?
I served in the U.S. Army.
What were the dates of your service?
I served from July of 1982 until April of 1987.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was enlisted. I volunteered.
So why did you join?
I joined mainly to get away from the carpet industry where I grew up. I didn't want to work in a factory, so I chose the military as a way to get out of that area. And
Did you pick the service branch you joined?
mainly because they were offering me a job of working in construction and carpentry, which I had quite a bit of skill at when I started. So
How old were you?
I had just turned 18.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
Yes, it was a very long, from 5 in the morning until almost 3 the next morning for the first day, is going through the in processing from Knoxville, flying back to Atlanta, and then to St. Louis. By the time we got from St. Louis into Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, it was pretty close to about a 20-hour ordeal.
And can you tell me about your boot camp or training experience?
So I did my basic training in AIT. It was what they call one station unit training, where you had the same group of people from when you joined basic training. Everybody that went through basic training had the same job as you. So you did your basic and AIT all as one unit, the same drill sergeants, all the same soldiers. So it was 13 weeks of everyone together.
And how did you get through it?
Well, most of the time it was by just trying to do my job and not get singled out for anything. Just kind of fly under the radar, so to speak.
Yeah, blend in.
Yep.
What type of work did you perform while in the service?
I worked as a combat engineer, which entails everything from building bridges, minefields, any kind of obstacle that would help direct or slow down the enemy. We did a lot of demolitions where we would blow bridges, blow an abattis where you systematically blow up trees that fall toward the enemy on a road in interlocking manner so that they couldn't push them out. All the way down to just basic carpentry, taking care of obstacle courses and confidence towers, rappel towers, stuff like that.
Oh, so you like worked, did some work in the basic camp or training as well?
Yes.
What did they teach you in service?
I guess the main thing they teach you is discipline, accountability, and do your job. You know, take care of the guy next to you because he's supposed to take care of you.
Yeah. Where did you serve?
I did basic training and advanced training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and then my first permanent party duty station was Fort Ord, California with 14th Engineer Battalion. And then after 2 years there, I went to Hanau, West Germany with the 23rd Engineer Battalion and served another 3.5 years there.
Did you serve during the war?
There was no active war during the time I served. There was a few police actions. 1983, it was Grenada police action. We actually, from Fort Ord, we were put on alert. We convoyed from Fort Ord up to Travis Air Force Base in Oakland, boarded the planes, loaded all our equipment, was ready to go, and within a few hours of departing, they called us off and took another unit out of Fort Lewis, Washington. But that was as close as I came to combat, which was fine with me.
Yeah. And so did you see combat then?
I did not.
Did you write home often?
Not as much as the folks at home would like. I was never good at writing letters, so it was, they were few and far between. But mostly when I did, it was to my mom.
What was that like? What were you writing to your mom?
Usually just trying to convey information about what we were doing, what we were training on. You know, ask questions to try and keep up with what was going on at home.
Yeah. So, and what do you think people today should know about what you went through, even though you were not in the Navy?
I suppose the fact that someone is willing to volunteer for military service, it shows that they're willing to sacrifice. Even if they didn't see combat, they still spend a lot of time away from their family, you know, a lot more difficult conditions than the average person goes through as far as what the military requires of you.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
Oh, so many. It was always fun. Like when I was stationed at Fort Ord, a lot of times on the weekends, we would go rock climbing. In the wintertime, we'd go skiing. So we were always very active, and it carried over to a lot of our training. Like when we did rappel training and stuff, they would bring in instructors from the air cav units to teach us to rappel out of helicopters. And most guys weren't very good at rappelling, so there were times where you'd do something like that and you would basically show off because you had the skills, you knew what you were doing. So we would push the envelope as to what the instructors wanted us to do. So,
and were you awarded any medals or citations?
I was awarded a Army Achievement Medal for a project where we were building a bridge. And myself and one other active duty engineer was driving a 5-ton dump truck hauling concrete rubble to build the abutments for the bridge. So we drove for a period of about 36 hours straight. And we were kind of competing with 3 National Guard drivers. And over that period of 36 hours, we hauled like 7 or 8 loads more than they did. So it was 2 against 3, and we still made more loads than they did. But that was one thing that I received an award for.
Mm-hmm. And did you get promoted?
Yes, I achieved Specialist 4 rank. I got that when I was working in the arms room at Fort Ord. I had inherited an arms room that had a lot of defective weapons, and so over a period of 6 or 8 months, I spent a lot of time taking these weapons, basically trading them in for better weapons or having them repaired, because there was only so much we could do at the first echelon level. So I took the arms room from a failing position when the IG, the Inspector General, came through, and over about an 8-month period, got it from, I think there was like 60 points that they inspected, and we failed 55 of them.
Oh, wow.
And this was like 2 weeks after I took over the arms room.
So you were just
And I had no
Left
clue
to
what
it.
I was doing. I was just kind of just doing what I was thinking was right. In that 8-month period, when we were re-inspected by the Inspector General, out of the 60 points, we passed 54 of them. So
wow. That's a huge improvement.
I think we done well on that one.
Something to be proud of. So and so Specialist 4 was your highest rank.
Yes.
And how did you stay in touch with your family?
Mainly calling. I would call them. When I was in Fort Ord, I would call usually once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks. When I got to Germany, it was a little more difficult. Sometimes it'd be every other month. But I would try and call home and at least talk to my mom. That was about the only person I kept in contact with while I was in service.
What was the food like?
Typical military food. There were times where it was acceptable, and there were times where it was barely edible. But there was always plenty of it, and I don't think I ever went hungry.
That's good. So, did you feel like any pressure or stress while serving?
Oh, at times there's stress, pressure. When you have an inspection coming up or something of that nature, you know, there's always the pressure to make sure you were able to do your job. Staying physically fit was very important. Regular basis, they would have PT tests. Other than that, it's a pretty good lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, the Army takes care of you, and you just got to do your job.
Was there something special you did for good luck, like a ritual or like your thing?
I've never really been a superstitious type person. So, can't recall anything that we did for good luck.
How did people entertain themselves?
We did our share of partying. A lot of soldiers are involved in sports. I played a lot of softball when I was in. And most posts, there's, you know, every company has a softball team. You know, you have tournaments. Over in Germany, it was a lot more than what it was when I was at Fort Ord. I played on the company team, and then after I got out, I played on a community team that was all soldiers.
Oh.
So that was fast pitch. Most of the tournaments over there are slow pitch softball. Really excelled at that. We had some really good athletes in my unit, and I remember one time we were playing in a tournament at Fliegelhorst Airfield, and I think there was 16 teams in a tournament, and we won our first game and then lost our second game, and we basically had to win the rest of the way
Yeah.
to make it to the end. And we got all the way to the championship game, and we were just so exhausted. It was just like we had about an hour break between the last game and the last game. And when we came back out for the last game, it was just like slow motion. We just, you know, we hit the wall. So, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could imagine. Did you go anywhere on leave?
Yes. I did a lot of Volksmarching when I was in Germany. So we would go all over, just a small town. There's kind of a directory, and Volksmarching was where people would just go out and walk, and there was always a meal afterwards. You got a little plaque or a ribbon or a button or a plate or, you know, something to commemorate that you did that walk.
Yeah.
Or a patch. And
To like gain After some time, you had a lot.
Yeah, I have a coat that's probably got 10 or 15 patches sewn onto it, like the windbreaker type jacket. And then I have another stack of probably another 30 or 40 patches that aren't sewn on it. They had a little booklet that was kind of like a passport. So every time you go to a Volksmarks, they would stamp the town name and the distance that you walked in it.
That's cool.
We went all over Germany, Belgium, Holland. I think that's about the only countries we made it into. Luxembourg, we did one in Luxembourg. We did one at Nijmegen, which is it's a 24-hour, 100-kilometer Volksmarch, and there's a lot of military, so like the Canadians and the French and the Austrians and Germans and Americans, everybody had like big teams, and a lot of, especially the Canadians, were really big drinkers. And they would have like a beer wagon with kegs on it. They had like 50 guys. They took turns pulling the wagon and drinking, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of camaraderie. You met a lot of people that otherwise you would never seen in your life.
Yeah. And do you recall any particular humorous or unusual events?
Humorous. Oh, you're always laughing in the military. Someone doing something stupid. We had a guy named Tim Worley that was a kind of a short, stocky, red-headed kid from down in Arkansas. And he was kind of a smart guy, but just the way he talked and stuff, everybody perceived him as slow.
Yeah.
And one night he came in, we had a little twin-size bed that was just springs, and they use that for a drunk bunk. Because a lot of times guys come in drunk, and if they're laying on their back, and vomit and aspirate that, and can kill them. So if you came in really, really bad drunk, they would put you on the drunk bunk. And Tim came in one night, and he was really drunk, and we took a black Sharpie and drew a big curly mustache on him. And he was notorious for just getting up in the morning, putting his PT uniform on, and just going to formation. He comes out the next morning, and he has no clue that he has this stuff on his face. And so our whole unit got to see what happens when you get on the drunk bunk. First sergeant called him up to the front and says, "This is why you don't come back to the barracks drunk, guys."
Yeah, that's a good story. Do you have photographs from your time in service?
Yes, I do. I have some from Fort Ord, not a whole lot. Most of the ones that I took, I wasn't in very many of them because I was always the guy taking pictures.
Oh, yeah, someone has to do it, so.
And so I got a lot of pictures of guys that at this point in my life, I don't even remember their names. Some of them I do, some of them I don't. But I have a fairly good collection of photographs.
Mm-hmm. And so these are people in the photographs, are they people from your squadron? And
yes, people from my squad, my platoon, my company.
Mm-hmm.
So there were people that I spent a good portion of the day with.
And did you make any close friendship while in service?
Yeah, you always had one or two guys that you were always hanging out with, the guys you went out drinking with, or you played softball with, or went rappelling or skiing with, and sometimes, different groups, that you would go out with. Sometimes just go do stuff by yourself, Or like over in Germany, sometimes we would just jump on a train and go to another town and
Just
let's check it out.
Yeah. And did you continue any of those relationships?
I didn't. because when I got out, I had just gotten married. My wife was in the service. So by the time we got out, my wife was 8 months pregnant when we flew back from Germany. And it was like going from military life to all of a sudden you got a family. And I guess we had one couple the girl was in my wife's unit and the guy was in my unit. And we met them in Colorado after we got out. And that's the one time that we've had any contact with anybody that we served with.
Did you keep a personal diary?
Not really.
Was it normal for soldiers to do that?
I guess from my perspective, I don't recall anybody that I hung out with that kept a journal or a diary or anything.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes. I departed the service in Germany, which means you have to out-process from all the organizations that you deal with in Germany, and then they send you back to the States, and you have to out-process through somewhere in the United States. So I out-processed at Fort Dix, New Jersey, I think it was. So then my wife was still in Germany, so they sent me back to the States. I out-processed. I went home to see my family for 2 weeks, and then flew back to Germany to join my wife.
So, yeah. What did you do in the days and weeks afterwards? Was that you're visiting family and stuff? But
yeah, and then as far as when I went back to Germany to be with my wife, I ended up getting a job with what they call morale support system, which runs all the enlisted club and officers clubs and bowling alleys and things that soldiers use, USO and stuff like that. So I ended up being a courier route driver, where I would drive between, I had like 7 little towns that I drove like a Volkswagen van, and I'd drop off paperwork, pick up deposits, and drop them off at the bank, and then back to headquarters by the evening.
Did you work or go to school?
I worked.
And was your education supported by the GI Bill?
No.
Did you take any college classes while you were in service?
No, I did finish my high school diploma. When I was a junior, I signed up for the delayed entry program to go into the service. And during that period, my parents divorced, and my mom left, my dad moved to another county. So after the first semester of my senior year, I didn't want to transfer to a different school, so I quit high school. At that point, the Army basically told me, if you don't graduate, we're not going to take you. And I was working like in a Waffle House, cooking, working part-time construction job, stuff like that. At that point, I wasn't sure I still wanted to go in the Army. And then when it came down to about 3 weeks before I was supposed to go in, the recruiter found me. He told me, he said, well, your scores on the ASVAB test were high enough, we're going to take you anyway. And so I ended up going in the military.
Did you join a veterans organization?
What?
A veterans organization?
I didn't up until about 2 years ago. I joined the American Legion.
And do you attend reunions?
I have not attended any reunions I haven't heard of any, so
yeah.
About the only one I keep in touch with, there's a web or a Facebook page for 3rd Armored Division that we were assigned to over in Germany, and every now and then you see something going on there, but it ranges from people that went through, that were in the 3rd Armor Division back in World War II all the way up until they basically decommissioned it in, I think it was 2007 that they decommissioned that division and took them out of Hanau and the Frankfurt area of Germany.
What did you do? What did you go on to do as a career after the war?
When I came back, we ended up living in Nebraska, and I started off in a small town where my wife was from. The population was about 120. So for the first couple of months, I just worked as a handyman around that town, and then ended up getting a job down in Ogallala, which was about 40 miles away, and I was working in an electronics manufacturing facility that I made the film that they use to make capacitors, called metallizing. So I did that for a few months, and I was working night shift from 7 at night to 7 in the morning. And having a young family, that was not very advantageous. We ended up moving to Ogallala to do that job, and then that didn't work out very well, so my wife took a job as a respiratory therapist in Oberlin, Kansas, and so we moved there, and I worked for a construction company for the year that we were there, and then we moved back to McCook in Nebraska, and I worked as an electrician's apprentice for about 8 months before I got into the Postal Service. And I got into the Postal Service in 1990, October of 1990, and I've been there over 28 and a half years now. So most of that time has been as a mail carrier here in Aurora.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yeah, it gives you a lot of insight of how things operate, how protocols dictate what can and can't be done as far as things that happen in another country. We have a lot of influence being the power that the United States is, but we still have to respect culture and things of that nature of the countries that we are allies with, and also the countries that we are partaking in combat in, such as Afghanistan and Iraq. So